Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to the Modern Sikh. My name is Manpreet Singh. Thank you for being with us. It's been a while, but we're back. Couldn't get the schedules to match. Jaspreet, Fateh, what's going on, man?
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Yeah, matching schedules is the least of our worries, but glad to be back. How have you been?
I've been good, man. I've been good. Yeah, things are rolling along. COVID is gone, mostly. Summer is here. So things are good. And I think we got together, and right now, it's just funny because you go on Twitter and social, and a lot of these issues are now coming up, which we talked about. But let's talk about it again. And really, the issue is about the LGBTQ community. What happened? I just opened so let me just start. I just opened my Twitter up, which I do every day. I work in marketing, I do social and all that stuff. So I opened mine up, and I saw somebody say Efterat Maryada, right? And then someone retweeted that as a quote saying, yeah, I stand with you and this and that. And I'm like, what is happening? Where did this come from? So then I read the whole thing and I saw like, okay, what's happening? And I was like, usually I don't even respond anymore, but I just couldn't hold back. So I started talking to people and started talking and responding, and just the world of stuff happened. So, anyways, have you seen that? What's going on in your end on Sick Twitter?
Yeah, I definitely saw that. The thing is that, remember when we had our podcast on gay marriage and the Anandagaras that took place, and we were like, people are very reductive to, they weren't perfect sex, and, they could have done it better, and they did it in a garden and all of that stuff. And I kind of want to bring that back. Back then, I even said, one of the most conservative takes that people take on in terms of social justice is that the branding of whatever is taking place overpowers the actual objective that's at the eye of that social justice movement. And that's the same thing here, is that people had an issue with him saying fuck that Atmriyada, but they didn't understand the underlying sentiment, right? The underlying sentiment being that him as a member of the LGBTQIA plus community felt like the Atmriyada restricted his options and made him make a false choice between either his orientation or his faith. And respectfully, that's not somewhere that anybody should be. No one should be forced to make that decision, and there should be a deliberative process to make sure that there's a definitive answer of why this isn't allowed in the Panth or why it is. But instead of that conversation taking place, what ended up happening was that sick Twitter, per usual, and this is a much larger conversation we're probably going to have, decided to just take off with the idea of them saying fuck that Atmriyada rather than, having the meaningful discourse on the topic that was actually being discussed in that video. On the same note, it's worth mentioning, I personally am not the biggest fan of someone saying fuck that Atmriyada, because I understand, like, I'm an Amritari Singh. I have dedicated my life to following that rehat for the rest of my life. So when I hear someone say something like that to the code of conduct that I have sworn my life to, obviously that brings up some feelings. However, it took me a day or two to finally understand where that person was coming from, and I was like, might have not been packaged the right way, but the gift itself, the message itself, I can understand it and respect it.
Yeah, I don't know if I could understand it and respect it, but that's just me. I saw what he said. And by the way, before I start, too, we wanted someone here from the LGBTQ community and stuff. They were just having some technical issues, so we can't have them. Hopefully, we'll have them on the next one to talk about it, because we're not part of that community. But that will come too. But yeah, I don't respect what he said in terms of, I understand if people say it in the heat of the moment. So in the heat of the moment, you say something, and then 2 days later, you're like, oh, I shouldn't have said it. Okay, my bad. Whatever. But that didn't happen. He's still on Twitter saying, "I stand by my words," and I say f this, and other people are saying things, defending him, defending the person. Let me say, so. Uh, I don't know. I can't stand for that. I mean, you can't say those things and not let other people speak and say things like if you say something derogatory, if I say something derogatory, I have to suffer the consequences. That's how the world works. So now you're going to suffer the consequences too, whether it comes from your community or outside the community. That's just how it is. And you shouldn't. And when I was going to talk to other Sikhs on part of that community on Twitter, they're like, "Oh, who made you gatekeeper? What do you know? You don't know our struggle and this and that." And I'm the problem is that they didn't want in that sense they didn't want like nice discourse. They didn't want like cordial conversation. They just wanted to blast off, say f this, f that, get their piece, get their f bombs thrown in and just gaslight things. And I'm like, all right, cool, man. You can't say that though. For me, you can't say that and not do it. I'll say whatever I want. This is Twitter too, right? I could say whatever I want too. So it's just that my thing is that, and I asked somebody on there too. I'm like, hey, why don't you come? We'll debate. We'll debate too. They're like, no, I don't want. They I don't know. They choose their words all like politically correct. Yet they call me, no, you're politicizing our movement and this and that. I'm like, all right, man. I don't know what to say to you guys other than I'm trying to say, and I'm trying to give them material that's on their side. I'm like, this will help, but saying f this will not help. Why don't you read this and read that, and this will help your case? Like, there's no homophobia on my end. I want you guys to just do it in a civil way so people know and understand, so you can make movements. But right now, nobody wanted to do that. Everybody just wants to throw the f bombs, gaslight, say a bunch of stuff, and it's cool too. And it's not like these people have millions of fans and followers, and the word is getting out. But you can't say something about somebody's faith. Just like you just said, you're an Amritari Sikh, and the Rat Murada you were allegiance to, let's say. And so you just can't say those things, man, and not, I don't want to say suffer the wrath, but you're going to get it from the community, and it's well deserved, in my opinion.
So, I understand your point too. That was originally my response, right, to the entire thing. I just let it kind of marinate in my mind. And what I realized was that when that Rat Maryada was created, you have to understand the context of it all, right? And I said this even on Twitter, is that the Rat Maryada was created around the atmosphere of an existential crisis to the Panth. Like, what does it mean to be a Sikh was being challenged at the time, and like books like Hum Hindu Nahi were needed. And that's when this was created. That's the context of this. By Karn Singh Nabha had to write that book, and then the Jathedar of Akal Takht wrote Hum Hindu Hain in response to his book. And so when that's the climate in which the Panth is living, at that time it's not the time to have the more, divisive conversations about whether we should let LGBTQIA plus communities into the Panth. At that moment, you have to bring the things that make are commonalities amongst everybody, and that's what people understand even to today. That the document is a compromise on all parts. It's not just, the Nahangs got what they wanted, the AKJs got what they wanted, the mission, whatever version of missionary existed back then, got what they wanted. No, it was a big compromise in order to keep the Panth unified. That's why it's called the bare minimum by many people when they talk about Tarat Mriyada, is because they understand that this is everything that we as a Panth could have agreed on in terms of how we should be living our lives and conducting ourselves. So obviously there's reasons why the LGBTQIA plus community wasn't mentioned, right? But at the same time, that frustration is also to be understood, because a lot of times people don't get acknowledgement on a topic unless you have a really hot take. That's how Twitter works, and you probably have seen this as well. If someone has a moderate take on a topic, they're not going to get likes, retweets, shares, and comments. You're not going to get discussion. You have to go off the far end of one side, and the polarity is what drives people towards having a conversation on the topic. And that's partially probably part of their frustration. Is like when they're saying F this, F that, that's kind of where it's coming from. Is like you're trying to push back against this community that's not wanting to have this conversation, trying to be very reductive and regressive in terms of, well, this is what it says, and then moves on, or just like if someone said LGBTQIA plus community should be included in the rehat, I don't think we would have seen a Twitter storm. I don't think we would have seen anything happening on Twitter. People would have just read it, laughed, and moved on. But because it was a ridiculous take and they could say something, they did say something. Bigots don't come out unless they have a superiority complex that they can flex. That's just kind of part of the game.
But the funny part to me is that you say after Admirada, okay, fine, because you want to get married, right? That's basically what their case is. So if you want to say that, the irony is then the Admirada is actually the one showing you the rules of marriage, like how to go about doing it. So if it's after Admirada or forget it, let me just say forget it because I'm tired of saying F. So like it's like forget the Admirada, then okay, so then forget it. And then do the wedding that you want to do. Why are you following the traditional norms of Sikh weddings that's in the Ratmarada? If you're saying forget it, then just go do whatever you want to do. Like, why do you even care?
Respectfully, that's an ultimatum that's not fair and it creates a false choice. I don't think that, again,
That's their choice. It's not a false choice by me. It's their choice when you say forget the Ratmarada.
right, but you have to understand when they're saying forget the Radha, let's use those words, that they're not, there's an emotion there that's not holistic. They have a very specific part of it that they have a problem with. We both acknowledge that. We know exactly what parts of the Ratmarada that have discriminatory practices intermingled with everything else that they have a problem with because it's not inclusive of them and accommodating for them. So their problem isn't with the entirety of the Ratmarada. So even setting the conversation up in that way is unfair, because that's not the crux of their problem. The crux of their problem is not how we do Lama, but who's allowed to do Lama. What constitutes a marriage? That's where they have a problem. They don't have a problem with doing Char Lama or one person walking in front and in the back, or Matha taking or the Shabazar song. Their problems come when it says Ananda Garaj is between a man and a woman. That's where their problem comes from predominantly. Is it's a heteronormative institutional practice that's been put in place that has marginalized them.
Yeah, okay, so I get all that. But that's exactly what they said. So I'm just saying, if you say that as a whole, like they didn't say what you just said. They said forget the whole thing. But they said forget it. So if I say, I mean that's how. I mean I know you're. It's a justification now. They just mean this part and that. But they didn't say that on Twitter. So or they're not, or the person said it didn't justify it that way too. He just like it's like this thing with a lot of Sikhs these days. It's like a disease of like. And it could be a good thing, but in this case, I don't think so. Where it's like, oh, well, my spiritual journey is my thing, and it's my we're spiritually we're the same, and all this like they want to do because with spirituality, it's all about spirituality. It's not about like code and doing things the right way, because then you got to hold people accountable, and no one likes accountability. So that's the thing. It's like now it's all about my spiritual. And like no one's arguing about your spiritual. Go ahead. I mean, the rat, like, think, what is rat? It's lifestyle, right? So it's a code of conduct of your lifestyle, of a Sikh lifestyle. They're guidelines. Yes, they're not set in stone either, but they are guidelines, which the Panth made. So then we could follow to, get to that Ikonkar level, right? So that's what it is. But when you say, so you're saying, no. Now it's my spiritual journey. Now they want their cake. They want to eat it too. They want all that stuff, and that stuff does not fly. So I understand what you're saying, and I agree with it too. By the way, I know what that was meant. But if they don't start saying it, then the whole punt is like, dude, you're not saying it the right way. So you're not going to get your way, and then you're just going to be just throwing F-bombs again and saying random stuff. And by the way, you're going to go nowhere. Blasphemy does not take you anywhere. I mean, come on, my 2-year-old's probably going to know that soon.
So I agree with you, but again, I'm going to go back to how I started this conversation. You can't expect people to have the perfect messaging from the get-go. You just can't. Not everybody's a marketing guy. All right. Most of us are average Joes in terms of being able to be articulate, right? And people say things the best of their ability, and more often than not, they're not able to filter their emotions out of what they're trying to actually say. Which, sure, that's a flaw, but it's not a flaw that makes it so that we can't meet them halfway. We should be able to read between the lines, be able to understand what they're saying without them necessarily saying it. That's our job. That's a part of the compassion part of Sikhi, is that we owe it to ourselves and owe it to our brethren and our sisters that when we're having conversations, we don't necessarily expect them to have the perfect words, but we understand the gist of what they're trying to say, and for the sake of argument, giving it a moment of respect and a moment of contemplation before we reply. Because I fell into the same trap. Like, reaction, like, this brings up the the larger conversation. Like, we're very reactionary on social media. We have no proactive conversations about almost anything. We're not doing any institution building online. We're not doing any discourse that's going to be anything beyond today's problems. We're not seeing further than our hand. And partially it's because, we don't have time for it. And it's sensationalization. Like, that's all it is. We live in a sensationalized worldview. And as a result, this is what happens, is that water reaches the brim and then it starts pouring over, and then we suddenly understand that the dam is breaking. And we should have done something earlier. And I think that's a cautionary tale that we need to start understanding right now. That we can't just, have feel-good conversations and quote-unquote safe spaces. Safe spaces is a great place for debate, for discourse, for things to take place. Safe space is not, this is what my feelings are, and this is how it should be, and then we move on. That's not safe spaces. Quite honestly, that's a co-opting of the entire idea.
Yeah, I honestly try to have a conversation with someone there, but nobody wants a real conversation. They just want to, I don't know, play the victim all day. That's what I said. So I hope they change. And by the way, they need to change. I mean, this is not gonna. You could maybe you can be harsh a little and abrasive, just like I am. I'm sure they think, but we could still be friends, and I will help you. But the community is not like that. So they need to start. They need to start that community, and I hope they do it fast. They need to start doing it civil, and I think there is. I'm sure this is just Twitter. I'm sure there's pockets all over the world where they're trying to do it the right way. Things take time, man. Things take time. I'm in America. Just normal laws here, normal things being decriminalized, or take years. Just gay marriage, women's voting, everything takes so much time. But I know we live in an on-demand culture where it's like, why isn't it right now? But that's just not how it works. It was called the suffrage movement. It takes times, man. It takes time.
Right. But I'm going to go back to what I was talking about, deliberation and being able to have vichar. One of the conversations I ended up having on there was that someone brought up the redistribution of wealth in terms of the LGBTQIA community being owed redistribution of wealth from Gurdwara and the Sikh community. And quite honestly, that, in my opinion, is a very, very tone deaf and very disrespectful take, particularly towards the black community. It's not that every marginalized community has been impacted economically or been taken advantage of economically, that they're owed some sort of wealth, or even the indigenous community. one of the questions I had for that person was like, name one time in the history of Sikhs where the queer community or any member of the LGBTQIA plus community was um, take taken advantage of by the Sikhs and they weren't compensated. And their answer was like queers helped build the Darbar Sahib and they fought for the gurus. And I was like, there is absolutely no documented evidence of what you're saying. It's hearsay. Someone said that it's likely possible, could have been, statistically speaking. Show me who, show me where, and they can't. And that's when you bring up something like that, and you're reductive towards, why is the black community asking for reparations? They're asking for reparations because literally their backs were used to build this country. The White House was made by African American slaves. The economy of this country for almost over 100 something years, 100 plus years, was built off of slave labor of predominantly African American people. And so when they're asking for reparations, it's because they were economically marginalized and disenfranchised. And as a result, they're asking for their fair share. Because this $1 trillion GDP economy that we live in was literally built off of their backs and they're owed some amount of it. And their stake of it has been pulled from underneath their feet over and over again, whether that was Black Wall Street being burnt down, or that was Jim Crow, or it was segregation, or if it was slavery, or even redlining. Their ability to grow economically in this country has been overtly and discriminatorily taken from them. And that's why they're asking for redistribution of wealth. Now, you bring that to this conversation, and it makes no sense. There's absolutely no indication of this taking place, and all they're doing is creating even more anonymity, not even towards themselves, but others, including the black community, because now you're creating an analogous situation that doesn't actually exist in the minds of Sikhs. Like, why are these people asking for money? And people won't understand that because they're not taking economic theory or social justice theories as courses in university.
I don't think a lot of them are taking a lot of theories. I honestly don't, man. The way they talk is just out there. But that's how it is. I guess as the beginning of the movement, you're always going to have a bunch of people from all sorts of the world saying crazy things, and hopefully it'll change. But yeah, that was just, I got some marketing advice that I want to share. I think this is good. And by the way, this is marketing advice. I'm not saying this is the right thing to do, but this is how the world works. Okay. They need, and I think this is how it's going to change. This is how it's going to change perception. This is how it's going to change, this is how it's going to move people. And this is going to be hard to do probably, but this is my advice to the LGBTQ community. You need an Amritdhari Sikh that knows history, Rat, Gurbani, to come out, talk about it, debate, go on, be taken seriously, do it the right way. You need somebody like that as a leader, or maybe not a leader, but somebody like that as a face of your movement. Because that's when the bunt will start talking. That's when that's when my dad will probably start talking about this. When this stuff happens. Right now, it's not that serious looking perception wise. I'm not saying the struggle ain't real. I'm saying perception is not that serious. Or they think it's not that many. But when some knowledgeable Amritdhari person comes out and debates and actually is like, and you can't even argue with that person because it's like, wow, he's right. He's right about Gurbani here. He's right about history here. He's right about Tarat here. Like, when that happens, that's when I think the movement is going to start taking legs. Right now, it's not going to take legs. It's not going to take people by storm or not take some equity in their mind because they just don't have someone like that. At least I haven't seen it. And if someone is out there, that is your best marketing person for the Sikh community. Anyway, that's my marketing advice. I think it'll work. I will definitely support it. I will even help out if anyone wants to tap me on social. There, I'll do it all for free to get the word out. But yeah, that is my advice for the community.
Well, there you go. Manpreet Singh on the Seva. Um, but yeah, I mean, I, I I see the merits of what you're saying. I don't necessarily agree for the same reasons that I've already mentioned. But identity politics is usually used by as a very conservative mode of undermining any movement. I think our community is above it. We just have to call it out in our community that we need to stop saying that your branding is not right, um, and using those reasons because it's worked in the West. That those conservative ideas have stopped movements over and over again in the past. But I think that because we're a smaller community, because we don't have the political incentive, like a lot of this is social, right? For our community, it's particularly heavily social because we don't have a government of our own. We don't have a state of our own. These internal issues are generally dealt in on a social dynamic level. And as a result, no one's getting more wealthy off of this happening, right? Um, and so when we're able to have this conversation without any skin in the game in terms of our own wealth, then I feel like we should be able to move past this. We just have to call it out and make sure that we're doing better. Um, in terms of what I said, again, is that it's a new issue. Anytime anything new comes up, and anytime a community is trying to interact with another one, it takes some feeling out to do. Like it takes some time for us to get acclimated with one another, and quite honestly, more often than not, we're not acclimated with ourselves, and as a result, it shows up in our relationships with other people. So we need to be more cognizant of our own biases, as well as being more open-minded than preaching that we're open-minded. Um, and I think that's my advice, is that when it comes to Vichar, we have to approach it with the shabad that comes to mind is manhali karsani karni, naam vi santokh sohaga rakh garibi ves, that we need to approach the conversation with humble clothing on our backs, and that humble clothing is, I have some information, I have some understanding, but I'm coming into this conversation to learn rather than to just sit here and teach, because we're all Sikhs, we're not gurus. And we need to start approaching conversations with that mentality. And if we do, I don't think there's anything that we can't have a conversation, run, and tackle as a community. It's just whether we're willing to do that. And I think if we don't even have that, doesn't matter who the person is that comes out. What will happen is, and it's happened before, someone comes out with an opinion, and that person is very well respected in the community. And simply because we're not able to be open-minded and actually give them a moment of our time to try to understand them, we've pushed them out of the community. That person's name was Professor Darshan Singh, right? When he came out and he spoke out against Dasam Granth, and he spoke up against eating meat back in the day, or spoke up for eating meat in the community, and he was excommunicated by the Panth. And that's happened multiple times. That's not the first time that someone that was trying to create some sort of change was excommunicated from the Panth for all the wrong reasons, all politicized reasons. Um, so, personally, I understand your marketing advice. I just don't think that it in itself will accomplish anything, because even in the past, when we've had the right person do it, someone that was a Kathavachak at a Gurdwara, one of the biggest Gurdwara in India, actually. I don't remember exactly which one it was. I wanted to say it's Seesganj side, but no, he wasn't he a Jathedar of Akal Takht at some point? Um, so when ex-Jathedar of Akal Takht is excommunicated from the Panth for his opinion, what chance do the rest of us have at being able to come out with our outlandish takes? And so we need to be very reflective on why that took place and how it took place and all of that. So that's my cautionary tale again to even that advice.
Yeah. So, 80% of Sikhs in the world live in Punjab. So you're not going to change them. I mean, I don't know where, you're not going to change them like you are, but I think you will change the West. I understand identity politics and all that stuff, and millennials are all like against this and that and this and that. I'm just telling you how the world works. Like I said, I'm not saying this is the right thing to do. I'm just telling you how the world works. And this is how the world works to get stuff through, to get in people's minds, to get into Gurdwaras and maybe make a speech there. Like, this is how the world works. And if that's not the game anyone wants to play, then we're going to play other games. That's cool. But I think this will help tremendously for the LGBTQ community and anybody else, really. I mean, this type of when you have, for some reason, still Sikhs look to other Sikhs and they're like, "Wow, this guy knows so much. This person knows so much, and this person, well, I want my kids to be like this person. Or I need to know this stuff." Or, they get enamored by that, and then they'll listen to that person, whether they're talking about politics, whether they're a doctor in their field, whatever it is. But that's what it is. So you got to start becoming an expert in something that you want to change. And if Ratmarada and Sarbat Khalsa is going to take again, you got to start getting experts together in your community to make that change and make it happen. Because I even said this to somebody on Twitter. I'm like, man, your Sikhi knowledge is like on a fourth grade level. Try to get. I bet you. Like, I know this is probably not good to say, but I'll say it anyway because I'm on a rant now. But if I ask these, because I called them. I don't know what I called them actually, but I was like, I didn't say this on Twitter, but I'm like, I bet you can't even name the Panch Pyare, yet you want Sikhi and you want that change and this change. Like, you guys, start learning, read a book, read some books, start quoting out of some books, start becoming experts. Now you're not experts. You guys are just, mouthpieces. The mouthpieces don't go anywhere. So that's where I'm going to go. I hope that happens. And by the way, you got to become, this is a universal rule. I'm not saying anything like crazy. Whatever career you're in, whatever job you're in, you want to be like the best at it and go up the ladder, become an expert, become a linchpin of that organization, no matter what you do. That's just a universal rule. You will rise up. But if you're just going to juke and jive and just like fake it here and there, you ain't going to go anywhere. Or it's very temporary gain. So start doing that.
Yeah, and I'll do my final closing remarks real quick. If you're seriously invested in getting the name of the LGBTQIA plus community to be accommodated in the Sikh community, and for you to have space in the Sikh community, you have to start the work regionally. Social media is not the place where you're supposed to be going first. Social media is the place that you go last, actually. Because you do all the regional work to gain as many followers as possible. You get as many people on the same boat as you, because you can have meaningful face-to-face conversations without the trolls hiding behind anonymous group accounts, without people trying to undermine you, and you don't know anything about their background. You need to be able to have meaningful conversation in the long term, and then you can go on social media after you've done the regional work, after you've done the local work, after you've worked in your cities, to be able to have a meaningful conversation abroad with someone else, because you've done all you can locally. But for the most part, that work hasn't been done. We still need to create more spaces for LGBTQIA plus communities in our local sangat, in our local gurdwara. That's where the work needs to start. You don't go on Twitter and rant about it. You start doing the work. And I'm just speaking on that from a political organizing perspective, because that's where my field is. And so, if you can't do that, then respectfully, all of this is for naught. You're not really doing anything. You're going to be a voice for today, and tomorrow there's going to be another hot take that we're all going to be fighting over, and nothing is ever going to get accomplished for anybody. You're just wasting your time. And that's just me being as respectful as I possibly can be, um, uh, but also as truthful as I possibly can be in terms of your efforts. What do you have to say, Manpreet Singh?
Yeah, man, no, I agree with you too, man. And I'm glad you closed it out like that. I just want to say, hopefully, we will have somebody else from that community here for a civil dialogue. Because I personally really want that community to be shown. I want that community to be heard. And I want to do whatever I could do, honestly, to tell you the truth. If I could do something for that community, great. You know, I just can't take blasphemy on things. That's just me, and I just can't take it, and that's how I'm gonna roll. But Jaspreet, man, it was good talking to you. Hopefully, we're definitely gonna connect soon for sure. And thank you everybody for listening. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.